Hey, you, amazing listener. Quick note before we get started. If you're listening in the UK or planning to be in London this September, Canva's AI Vision event is coming your way. It's a brilliant day of conversations with leaders shaping the future of AI, and I think you will love it. Check the QR code on screen or search for AI Vision London to learn more and grab your spot.
I think there's a lot of bad work out there and creativity comes from lived experience. Good creativity comes from lived experience. And so I don't think AI will kill design in the purest sense of the word.
Welcome to Prompted, a podcast about AI, people, and the creative spark. I'm Cameron Adams, co-founder and chief product officer of Canva. And today I am joined by Tey Bannerman. Tey is an AI strategist, product designer, and former McKinsey partner who works at the intersection of technology and human behavior. He started his career as a software engineer before transitioning into product design, then went on to lead the European design practice at McKinsey, where he helped organizations implement machine learning and early generative AI systems. Today, Tey advises companies on AI strategy and human-centered implementation. He teaches AI to design and business leaders, and he co-authored The AI Revolution, a #1 Amazon bestseller in AI. Tey, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Cam, and great intro.
It is amazing to have you here. I don't think I've spoken to a #1 bestseller yet, so this will be a first.
Cheers. Looking forward to it.
Now, we love to kick things off with the prompt, which is where you get to tell us the story of a moment that shaped you while you draw it. We're going to take that drawing, use a bit of AI magic to turn it into something amazing by the end of the show. Are you ready to tell us your story?
I am ready, yep.
All right, well, lay it on us.
So I must have been 13 or 14, and so a kid growing up Pacific Islands, and my dad, he's a property valuer. So basically what he does is he goes out, inspects properties, and I would go out with him sometimes and help him measure properties. But then he'd also ask me to type up the reports because I was kind of good at computers when I was 13, 14. And I got to a point where I realized I was just typing the same things over and over again because the reports were pretty standard. So what I ended up doing was I could be saving my own time if I built something that allowed me to just go, here are the inputs, and just kind of generate a report. But there was nothing at the time that kind of could do that. So I did a bit of research on the early internet and worked out that I could create a database with Microsoft Access and then use something called mail merge to Microsoft Word, and then basically have a standard template and then go, okay, here are all the fields, and then just kind of, populate all the bits of the report. And so I basically built this thing when I was 14 for my dad to be able to create these property valuation reports just en masse. And so I'd go out with him, measure stuff, write it all down, and then kind of come back home and then go generate a report. And then I could go out and play, football with my mates. But,
I definitely want you as my AI advisor because you've got exactly the right brain to figure it out.
What I'm drawing is me as a 14-year-old kid with like a tower computer, tower PC, and it's probably like 2 a.m. We didn't have a bedtime, so I just kind of stay up at night, just kind of tinkering. And so, yeah, it's me behind the computer, middle of the night, kind of building this thing for my dad. There's not much life in my drawing, though.
There's your amazing artwork. We're seeing the back of Tey's head. The tower computer is definitely there.
Yeah, window with no sunlight.
There's something going on the left. Is that a coffee table? I don't know. But
yeah, I have this memory of this table next to the computer. It's just, yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to be an integral piece of this artwork. And is there a particular style that you would love to see Brody take on? So we're going to hand that sketch to Brody. He's going to turn it into something amazing with AI. But do you have any guidance, any paths that you want to send him down?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking kind of neoclassical, those kind of very regal looking paintings. Sometimes you see kind of, lots of human bodies or like someone on a horse, and it's kind of a little bit realistic. I think it's from like 1820s or something. Those types of, yeah. Where like you can imagine a big palace with a massive 2 meter by 4 meter painting. Yeah, one of those.
My neoclassical knowledge isn't quite up to scratch, but I hope Brody's art history experience is deep. So we'll see what you come up with by the end of the show. Thank you, Tay. That was an amazing story. I'm sure it's going to end up with something intriguing. But right now, I want to dive deep on AI with you.
Let's do it.
So you started out as a software engineer, then moved into design, and eventually became a partner at McKinsey. I would love to know how your coding brain, which we got a bit of through your story at the top of the show, shapes the way that you think about creativity and strategy today.
Yeah. I mean, I think I feel so fortunate to have learned to code at a young age because I really believe that coding teaches you about constraints, and I think constraints breed creativity. And so when you code, I mean, like you might have the most brilliant idea, but the code doesn't care about your idea. And so you are up against basically there's a back and forth multiple times a day where your ideas are being tested against reality essentially. And so and I think if I think back, kind of taught me a lot of humility, taught me discipline, and I think those are kind of important things to learn, especially when you're young. So I think coding is an important skill. Maybe not like the actual act of coding, but I think everything around it that coding teaches you.
Constraints breed creativity. This is kind of the phrase that you used. What does
Yeah,
that mean in today's AI world where there's pretty much no constraints? Like anyone can create any image, they can create a video, they can create a presentation in Canva from
yeah.
scratch. There's no limits now. So what does that actually mean for creativity when you're not constrained?
I think there's a lot of bad work out there that has been where people use AI. But I think kind of the best work is where people either have the constraint of here are my users or here's my audience. That I think that in itself is a constraint. So really deeply understanding who you're designing something for and kind of ensuring that what you design is actually going to be fit for purpose. I think there's also a constraint of kind of what actual inputs you give. I think you can be very vague and get something kind of very homogeneous that looks the same as everything else. You can, start to be very specific. So I do think that, maybe the definition of a constraint may have changed with AI tools, being completely boundless. But I really do believe that kind of understanding who you're really kind of designing for is an important constraint that means that you'll get a better outcome.
Yeah, I think that unique part of your outcome, a huge part of it is the context that you're giving it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
whether that's a strategy doc that you've written or data that you've pulled together, what you
exactly.
give to the AI is part of that creative process, which I think a lot of
Definitely. Yeah,
people need to
yeah,
get better at.
absolutely.
I think 10 years ago, digital literacy was a huge thing. Like teaching people to code was going to be the next big frontier. We thought it
Mm.
would unlock people's ability to find jobs and experience new creativity. Nowadays, it feels like coding is a skill that you don't need at all. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's two-sided. I think probably the skill of coding itself matters less. I mean, you have coding assistants, you have vibe coding, but I do think that I mean, a little bit of what I was saying before. I think the discipline of coding teaches you a lot about systems thinking, a lot about logic, a lot about cause and effect. And so I think just the types of thinking, the types of kind of principles that you develop when you do learn to code, I think are going to be more important than ever. So even though, it's not about knowing Python itself or knowing Java or JavaScript, I think everything else that it teaches you, basically a lot of how to kind of question things, a lot of how to think in systems. I think, the people that are going to thrive in our new AI world are those people that have those skills.
Do you think we're at risk of losing that ability to learn the logic and the discipline that you're referring to? Are we going to have a whole swathe of people coming through that haven't been pressure tested in this educational environment, have just kind of leapt to somewhere where it's just about prompting for an app?
Probably being very, very,
Are you,
very realistic. I think,
are you getting any
yeah,
signal from education systems and how graduates are going and what they're experiencing as they
yeah.
roll out into the workforce?
I mean, I think the education system hasn't caught up yet. I think everything from the way people are assessed to kind of what people are taught, which is a lot of, you're taught kind of knowledge as opposed to foundational skills in a lot of places. And so I think that needs to change. And we're maybe kind of half a generation away from that. I'm not an expert in education. I don't know how quickly things kind of go, but I think if I, look at a school today and I look at school when I went to school, I don't see much difference. Yeah.
You've got an incredible multidisciplinary background, code, design, consulting. How did you end up in the field of AI?
Kind of through necessity. So it was about 8 years ago, and we were basically kind of working on a project. This is while I was at McKinsey, working on a project with a bank where we were trying to build a personalization engine, essentially build something that allowed us to take all the data that we had about customers and then go, okay, what should we either recommend them or what educational guidance should we give them? And rules-based systems just didn't cut it. And so we essentially had a little data science team that started building a machine learning model. And what I quickly realized is that a lot of what it takes to build a machine learning model that is actually going to help real people, a lot of kind of decisions around what is ethical, a lot of decisions around what is the right type of insight or experience that the end user will actually kind of, take value from. Those decisions need to be made at the very beginning. And so having someone like myself who comes from a human-centered background in there with data scientists meant that we were going, what data should we use? How should we actually think about building this in a manner that's actually going to be kind of meaningful to real people? So that's kind of where I got my start in AI. And then kind of generative AI came along, and I kind of became quite fascinated. And again, this is now 7 years ago. And I remember doing a talk 7 years ago to a group of designers
Yeah.
at a design conference. And I was talking about AI. And actually, there's a photo of me at this conference. And the slide I have says, "Will AI kill design?" And this is 7 years ago. And at the time, I'd kind of seen the first generative models, and I went, "Ooh, I can see where this is going." But at the time, it just wasn't a thing that people talked about. It wasn't in the mainstream. But since then, I've actively been working to try and educate people and try help people see, hey, how can I be a part of this as opposed to have this as something that happens to me?
What was your take on that question 7 years ago? Will AI kill design?
The short answer was no. And I think a big part of that is I think design isn't just the output. I think design is the process by which we create something. And I think people will always have a desire to be creative. People will, and creativity comes from lived experience. Good creativity comes from lived experience. And so I don't think AI will kill design in the purest sense of the word. Yeah.
On that first AI project that you worked on, were you rolling up your sleeves? Did you have the Tower PC out and running a Microsoft Access database? Was that part of it?
It's basically, yeah. I mean, we had very heavy laptops, so we've upgraded slightly. I'm still a very hands-on person. I consider myself a builder, so I'll always be kind of in the guts of the code and the machine whenever I can.
That curiosity and also a bit of stubbornness seem to be really important threads in your career. Can you share a moment where using these traits really led to a breakthrough for you?
At McKinsey, a lot of the work I was doing was helping very large companies essentially kind of build new products, new systems when they didn't have the capability themselves. And one of my earliest projects was essentially with a big pizza company, let's call them. And we were designing and building a whole new delivery platform. So essentially kind of, something like Deliveroo, Uber Eats that allows people to order pizza. And we were essentially told, like, we have all this customer data, but we shouldn't use it to identify customers. And that was kind of a hard line. And
Yeah.
and I remember kind of we were running customer interviews, and I'd already seen that, hey, this is someone that had used our new platform. And so we're in the first couple of months of kind of launching the platform. We didn't have all the features, but I remember this lady, and I remember going like, I actually think that she's placed an order before, and she kind of bounced, like she didn't actually kind of end up placing the order. And
Yeah.
I remember kind of launching into this line of questioning that essentially implied that I knew that she'd used the platform before. But
Okay.
one thing that we were struggling with was that we couldn't work out why a a fairly decent amount of people would come into the new platform, start their order, and just leave.
Mm-hmm.
And they might come back an hour later, but a lot of them just left and we didn't know why. And we couldn't compare like for like against the old platform. But through this line of questioning, I learned two things from this lady. One, if she goes, I want my pizza to come at 8:30 and we deliver it at 8:20, that's not good.
Okay.
Um, and she was basically saying, I have three kids, I have a plan, and if it comes 10 minutes early, my whole plan goes out the window.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Another thing is she went, you guys don't have half and half pizzas anymore. I have like a 5 and a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I need to be able to order like half Hawaiian and half pepperoni
Half and
because they
half
can't
is the best. I
get
don't, how can you ever not offer half and half?
Yeah, but we didn't have it at the time. But that helped completely kind of tweak the roadmap to go, actually, we need half and half pizzas like stat, because that's like a big proportion of customers where we actually didn't realize that it was, you know, basically people wouldn't order if it wasn't present. So two lessons there. I mean, partly from being stubborn and partly from probably breaking data privacy rules. Um, that kind of led to breakthroughs.
Such great lessons. And I think it really highlights these moments that you get when you connect with customers that's beyond just looking into a spreadsheet and looking at the
Yeah, yeah,
quantitative data. It's like talking to someone about their needs and having those
yeah,
light bulb moments and thinking about that context that we need to feed into AI tools nowadays. That is the context that we need that we're not going to
yeah.
get anywhere else. So that's
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
me, that's a critical human skill that we need to drill into.
No, that's so true. Yeah. Yeah.
I think you love bringing together really different people to look at a problem or an opportunity. People like artists, ethicists, architects, technologists. What kind of tensions or disagreements do you actually want those people to surface in order to produce a great result?
I mean, one, me having kind of the engineering background, design, that internal tension that I feel sometimes between being kind of very logical and being creative. And I think when you bring people from different disciplines together, it tends to unearth that tension. And, you know, it can be kind of decisions between, okay, do we kind of use all the data possible, even though that might not kind of be the best thing for a user, and that might kind of, you know, ask us to kind of, you know, ask users to disclose much more than they should? Or do we kind of be very kind of specific? And you know, I find that having that tension tends to unearth the right questions to ask about the best way to design or build something. And I find that if you just have a group of people that come from kind of, you know, similar disciplines or backgrounds, you don't tend to get those questions. And so I find that kind of, yeah, bringing people together in that way really kind of just helps you as a group start thinking differently. And it's definitely kind of uneasy at the beginning, but I think it tends to lead to much better results.
That is another great point about bringing the right context, asking the right questions, having those questions that you need to answer when
Yeah.
you go to a tool is incredibly important. And that's another great skill I think that people can develop is asking the right question. Now, I love to get practical here because I think everyone's learning to use AI tools, figuring out the best way to integrate it into their workflow, and hearing how leaders like you are using it is really valuable. So, as an AI strategy leader, I imagine people think you've got a highly complex, futuristic daily routine. But what does your personal use actually look like? What does a typical Tuesday morning look like for Tey?
Being very honest, typical morning, I don't look at my phone for the first hour.
Great idea.
And that's kind of, you know, one of my rituals. It means that I'm completely kind of zoned into what I'm doing. But in terms of AI, I use AI tools every single day. And a big like portion of my work, let's say I have a project I'm doing with 4 or 5 people, helping a, let's say, small company do or build something. I will have a project set up, and that project has all the context around this is what I'm doing. Um, the most valuable thing I've found is it also has context around the people and the relationship dynamics between them. And I tend to do that by going, okay, at the beginning, here are all the emails that we've exchanged. And I'll
Mm.
ask, Claude ChatGPT to go, based on these emails, what can you draw about the personalities of each person and their relationship dynamics? And I have that as part of the project so that if I'm going, okay, hey, I am, typing up this email or I'm putting together this strategy, help me kind of think through things because I have insight about those relationship dynamics. I tend to get an output where it goes, here is how you should consider this because this person is in this particular situation, or because John and Jim don't have a great relationship, you should be mindful of doing this. And so it just helps me think far broader than I would. And so a lot of kind of, my prompting and the work I do, I pull in all those elements so that I get a much more considered view than I would if I was just going kind of, give me X in ChatGPT.
That is a super interesting tip because I've heard of people, prompt, you are an expert software engineer, please give me your opinion. But like actually giving real data on people and the relationships and then getting the AI to give their perspective on it is an incredible way of thinking.
Yeah, and I mean, it's come about. I've probably experimented with so many tools, so many things, and I'm always looking for ways to kind of be better in the way I work with others. And so I think that's what I'm always optimizing for. Not the best way to use a tool, but how can I be better, more efficient? And that's where a lot of these ideas tend to come from.
How structured do your projects look like? Do you worry about data quality or having the wrong data in there? Like maybe you forwarded the wrong email in, or do you just like jam everything in and let the AI figure it out?
I'm quite deliberate about what I do put in. I mean, I've talked to people who will say, yeah, I just kind of enter voice mode and I just kind of put in a stream of consciousness. That's not me at all. I am very strict and tight on, okay, I'm only putting in these docs, these parts of the email because I don't, I don't want things to be polluted, one. And we've all seen just kind of random outputs from AI tools, and that's one thing I'm trying to avoid as well. And I find that the more control I feel I have, the more trust I have in the actual output.
Are there any tools outside of the big LLMs that you regularly incorporate into your workflow?
Yes. So when it comes to anything visual, there's a tool I use called Luma, and it doesn't have your typical chat window. It's like a big Miro board, like
Okay.
a big open canvas, but you can drag in an image, you can put in a prompt, and then you can start basically connect things up and go, okay, create me a new image that kind of is a remix of that image, or turn this into a video. And so you kind of have this spider's web, and I find that just with anything creative, that messiness is captured well in that type of workflow. So yeah, that's one tool I use when it comes to anything creative, and then I've built like a bunch of my own stuff as well.
Might be a tool like Luma, but can you share a recent example where you used an AI tool to brainstorm and it actually helped you see an everyday problem or solution in a radically different way?
Yeah, quite recently. So with one of the teams I'm working with, there essentially was a moment where we had a discussion around how do we essentially kind of think about sign off. So building a new product, multiple teams having to have to come together, and we basically went, we have no real governance. And so what I did was, I basically pasted the email chain, which had 5 or 6 people in it. And because of what I talked about earlier, where I have the context around here, the people on the project here, the relationship dynamics, um, Claude surfaced to me that, hey, the problem here isn't governance. The problem is a lack of clarity. Um, and I went, yeah, actually, and basically when what people are looking for is, where do I go when I need a decision to be made, or when I want someone to review my work, as opposed to let's introduce new layers of governance and new sign-off processes. And so rather than going, okay, let's put together this governance document, we just end up having a conversation. And I wouldn't have done that if it hadn't been for kind of, me putting the email chain in Claude and having that context around here, the people and the relationship dynamics.
Are you starting to see Claude as a better partner? Like, is it pushing you? Is it asking more questions of you? Or to get that result, did you have to tell it, please give me a different perspective?
One thing I always do when I prompt is I go, is this clear? Ask me as many questions as needed to get clear. So, and if I don't get questions back, I feel uneasy. So I always prompt it for Claude or ChatGPT to question me. And I find that me being forced to answer questions also forces me to think, is this actually the right approach? Have I given all the context as well?
There's new capabilities that are coming out every single day. And I think there's literally 10 new tools that come out on the AI scene every day. How do you stay on top of it all? Are you constantly trying out new tools, or are you in a place now where you're happy with your tooling?
I am constantly trying out new tools, and a lot of it, I mean, I have like a little server at home where I test out local models. And I mean, if you look behind me,
Yeah.
I actually have I have a lot of plants at home, but you can't really see because it's a bit blurry, but every plant has a little sensor in it, like a
Okay.
little soil nutrient sensor. I have humidity sensors, there are cameras, and there's an AI team in my house that actually looks after my plants. But I'm
Amazing.
constantly doing a lot of experimentation on that AI team. I'm testing new models, new tools, new approaches, but they basically, I mean, I can go into like extreme detail about my AI plant care
We'll turn
team.
this into a gardening podcast.
But that's like, I mean, it's almost like a low stakes way to test things where it's not client work. It's not kind of, me potentially getting fired if if there's a hallucination or I make a mistake. And so I find that having something low stakes that allows me to test different tools and techniques, means that kind of I get into kind of this excited experimentation phase where, where it's low risk. Yeah.
I'm hoping to see a little robot just trundle past and water one of your plants.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. That's next.
We all have those moments where we've tried to use AI to save time and it just ends up being twice as long. I would love to know what's a recent funny or frustrating AI fail you've had where maybe it just didn't pan out.
I will talk about my plants again now. So because
Okay.
so
It's definitely a gardening podcast now.
so and it's a relevant story because as part of actually kind of building this, I mean the times where I've been up till 2 or 3 a.m. just kind of prompting and trying to kind of get it to be as optimal as possible. And kind of I remember like early on, when I was building this, I was using ChatGPT to essentially go like, what are all the bits that I need to actually build this in the right way? And um, I mean, I got this list of, okay, you need to buy all these kind of parts and tools. And then I went and bought everything. And then when it all arrived, I realized, okay, one, none of this actually connects together. Um, two, none of this actually works in the way I wanted it to. And it was because, I mean, one, like ChatGPT had basically hallucinated a bunch of stuff around how this
Okay.
all works. I guess because no one else is building plant care AI.
Yeah.
So, but I essentially hadn't thought things through. I'd just taken the answer and gone off and just kind of gone on this kind of rabbit hole of buying stuff and pulling stuff in. But I think it taught me kind of a lot about, okay, like don't go out and spend money based on an LLM's recommendation without actually questioning things. Yeah.
What we need to do is plug all the plants together and get them to come up with their own AI model that is telling us what they need.
That's actually in my system. I created a bit where I get the AI agents to actually have a suggestion box.
Yeah.
So they suggest things to me and the plants tell them, hey, can you suggest this to Tay? But they don't know that I can see it. They think it's anonymous. And I find that kind of
The plants think it's anonymous?
yeah, so the plants think it's an anonymous suggestion box, which means like sometimes they go like, Tay's not taking care of me very well. Can you tell him? So it's just kind of hilarious.
Plants have a concept of anonymity?
Um, it's a great question. It's a great philosophical
But
question. I don't have it.
do plants have an idea of identity? Does your fiddler leaf think differently to your Swiss cheese plant?
Yes, actually. And I think part of that is how the LLMs have interpreted them based on, like I have a Zanzibar plant which is very hardy, doesn't need much care, and so the LLMs have interpreted it as okay, it's very stubborn, robust, it's
Okay.
very stoic, versus the ones that are more delicate. Yeah.
That is so cool. There's an entire plant AI ecosystem right behind you. Now, you're not just an AI builder, you also do an incredible amount of deep thinking and great writing about it as well. And you've come up with this great framework called the Four Modes Framework. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so it essentially came from a place where over the course of a year or so, I'd had so many conversations with people that asked, "Hey, how do you use AI?" Or, "Hey, I'm using an AI tool to do, to create emails at work or to draft auditing documents." And I just started writing all these things down because I was just curious about what everyone was doing. And then I got to a point where I went, like, so many people are going, how do I use tool X in the right way for my work? And I realized that it's not about the tool, it's not about the specifics of what you're trying to prompt, but essentially everything boils down to four modes. Are you trying to expand your thinking? Are you trying to compress, which is you have a lot of information and you're trying to boil it down to make sense of it? Are you trying to reflect, which means are you essentially trying to question your own thinking or judgment? Or are you trying to just get something done? Are you trying to execute? And so those are the four modes. And this massive list I'd written, I realized that every single thing on that list in terms of tasks that people were using AI tools for fell into one of those four modes. And that's where the framework came from. And so now kind of, it's something that I teach people to essentially go, don't start from how do I prompt, or don't start from which tool do I use. Start from which mode am I in? What am I actually trying to do? And then from there, go, okay, I'm in, reflection mode. Here is how to actually reflect properly. And here's how to go into Claude or ChatGPT and kind of, use a reflection prompt. So just really changing the way that people think about using AI tools to start from what am I trying to do, as opposed to how do I prompt or use the tool.
Okay, I'm in reflection mode. How do I reflect properly and then translate that into the tools I'm using?
A lot of how I use reflection is essentially to help me see things from other people's perspectives and help me see holes in my thinking. And so I'll tend to kind of start with, okay, here's the context. So I'm preparing for a podcast with Cam. And here is kind of, my perspective on a particular topic. And here's what I know about Cam. Help me see it from Cam's perspective. Help me understand where our kind of ideas or mindsets might differ. And so it just helps you really kind of see things that you may not have seen yourself, because people tend to kind of be in their own tunnels, so to speak. Yeah.
How do you remind yourself of these four modes? Do you have like a little post-it note on the side of your laptop that's like, remember the mode?
I know I tried to make it simple enough that once you kind of go through the modes kind of, a few times, it tends to just become second nature. Yeah.
Compression mode is where you take a ton of data and you basically get
Yeah.
AI to figure out what that data is all about. How do
Yeah.
you verify what it comes back with? Because, we've seen hallucinations before. There's often
Yeah.
multiple patterns inside data, or maybe there's kind of some tenuous patterns that aren't actually true signal. How do you make sure when you're giving it this ton of data that you probably can't inspect that
Yeah.
it's giving you the right answers back?
A lot of times, and with kind of there being more and more data, it's almost impossible to kind of, review all the data. But I always take an action of doing some research myself, to get kind of familiar with the data or the source material, and then reviewing anything that comes out to, one, make sure it actually makes sense, to verify the sources. And so, if it's a massive data set, with using AI and data, you always wanted to go, okay, what are the references? Where kind of did this come from? I'll go check those references myself. And so I think, the diligence of checking, sense checking, verifying, I think that's an important skill. when using any AI tool. And that's something I always remind people, like, check everything. Ultimately you're responsible and accountable. You can't just hand everything off to an AI tool.
So you sometimes start with a hunch and you're getting the AI to validate that hunch, or do you just like give it very objectively the data set and just say, give me whatever you can think about of this data?
Yeah, I'll do both. I'll start with, here's the data set, give me what you can. Then I'll go, here was my hunch. How does my hunch fit into kind of, the output that I've seen? So I'll almost kind of have something in my back pocket. But what I tend to find is that putting that in afterwards, you tend to kind of almost like get this back and forth challenge, as opposed to just validating your own thinking. And I think LLMs are very good at saying, yes, what that thought that you just had was brilliant, and that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, I think bias is a massive problem because so many of these AI systems are, quite sycophantic and they're trying to
Yeah,
please you. So any signal that it picks up on what it thinks you might want, it will reflect that back to you
exactly.
and find some way to contort it to your point of view. So I love that idea of putting in your hunch afterwards so you can have that proper conversation and it's a lot more objective.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when a team is trying to force AI into a workflow just so they can say they're AI powered, how do you try and redirect that conversation and get them to a productive place?
I think asking why is such an important skill, and a lot of times requires courage. So, but I've got to a place where I love being that person in the room that goes, why are we doing this? Who are the users? Who's actually going to benefit from this? And what's the worst thing that would happen if we didn't do this? And I find that it just tends to breed the right type of conversation where we're actually questioning the merit, the value, the kind of the purpose of what we're doing. And I think questioning the purpose of what you're doing tends to start you on a path to go, okay, let's actually think through what's the right thing to do. And so that's something I always push. Ask why, and just keep asking why.
Are you having many conversations nowadays where the answer is don't use AI?
Yeah, I think increasingly, and I think part of that is because there are so many problems that can be solved without generative AI or without an LLM, with just good old fashioned technology, or by, like one of my examples, just having a conversation with people. I find that if you start by going, what are we really trying to achieve here? Who is this for? And, how will they benefit? I think a lot of the answers will be, actually, we don't need AI to solve this problem or to capture this opportunity.
Does that lead into this phrase you use called productive friction? Like, when do you just step away from technology and just scribble something down which starts formulating your thinking?
Yeah, it does. And I think there's actually a lot of brilliant research that shows that the act of actually writing something, whether it's on a whiteboard, whether it's on paper, just kind of spurs a different type of thinking and kind of triggers different memories and triggers kind of elements that spark creativity. So, and that's kind of where, that friction comes in, where it's not about just moving quickly to an answer. It's about taking that step back and going, let's actually think this through. Let's kind of connect the dots. Let's kind of bring in different perspectives.
I think another area where AI projects often fail is actually in trust. And you've actually done a lot of work in this and seen it firsthand. How have you seen trust become a problem in projects like this?
Trust is probably the biggest barrier to AI adoption. And I think a lot of companies are going in thinking, we just put the technology in there and people will just start to use it. And whether that's employees using AI tools or your users, using AI features. And I think there's so much evidence out there now that what you need to solve for is not, does the tech work, or like, do you have the best model, but do people actually trust what you're saying, and do people actually trust that this thing will work in their best interests? And I mean, I love reading old research papers, and there's a really fascinating research paper from 25 years ago, I think, which was about how employees trust their managers and the conditions that are needed for employees to trust their managers. And I think it kind of said, three conditions needed to be met. One, you actually kind of value the manager's opinion, like, so you believe that they're actually good at what they do. Two, you believe that they're acting in your best interest. And three, you kind of have a way to go back down the ladder. So if you lose their trust, like, you don't get reprimanded for it. And I think it's the exact same thing with AI and AI tools. I think, if you don't believe that the output is going to be valuable, you immediately lose trust. If the first thing that you do in ChatGPT, you immediately get a hallucination back, it's unlikely that you're going to kind of go back and keep using it. Two, if you think that, your company bringing in an AI tool, they're doing it to replace you, you don't believe they're acting in your best interest, again, you're not going to trust kind of, the program, you're not going to trust the system. So I think there's just so much out there that we can draw on the topic of trust that companies should be utilizing to really go, okay, are we doing this in the right way? And do the people that we're doing this for actually trust us?
Should most employees nowadays trust their bosses, their managers? You mentioned a lack of trust in bringing AI tools in because people think it's going to be, the start of automation of their role. How do you think organizations are actually approaching this?
Being very frank, I think a lot of organizations are approaching it in the wrong way. I think a lot of organizations are not consciously and deliberately involving the people who will be affected, involving the people closest to the work in the rollout, in the implementation of AI tools. And I think that's where a lot of trust is being broken. And I think kind of, if you're asking people to essentially be affected by a technology that's coming in, I think you owe them the responsibility to participate, in that process. And I think that's something a lot of companies aren't doing.
Is that still participating in their own demise, though, or is it heading to a better place?
I don't think demise is the right word, because I think I tend to see that when people actually participate in that process and are brought in and help design how do we do this in the right way, then they also get to a point where they go, here's how I need to change with this new workflow process, because they've been part of it. So I think a lot of people evolve and adapt as a result of being part of that process.
HR and legal are two of the hotspots that you're seeing for this area, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have a great story of someone who did get involved in this change management in their own specialty and that then segued into a completely new role or a new way of thinking about their work?
Yeah, and so it was a very boring project. So I was working with an insurance company, and they'd actually approached us because they'd done this big AI project where they'd built this AI tool that essentially looks at insurance claims. And so, you call up, you've had a car crash or something, you call up the insurance company, and they had this new system where the person from the insurance company sees a system that goes, okay, this is the percentage chance that this is a real claim, and this is how much to kind of, to say the person, can claim. And what the company found kind of 6 months in were just the employees weren't using this. And so we were called in to work out why. And we quickly worked out that none of the employees that were being asked to use this had been involved in the process of designing and building it at all. And so we kind of put together this small group, and we quickly started to understand why. But the way that they kind of felt it should work was not, hey, here's a percentage number, but here are essentially prompts that help us ask the right questions to the person on the other end. And then based on those questions, we're still able to use our judgment, but we're able to get kind of ranges, because a single number is much harder to trust than something that kind of feels like, okay, this is a range that you can work with. And so this kind of, mini team essentially ended up redesigning the entire product, and kind of, started to create a new unit where they helped other parts of the business start to design new AI products, because they kind of started to understand, okay, here are the right questions to ask others. Here's how to understand the business case. So it was kind of a real heartwarming story of people who potentially could have been very negatively affected by by this kind of actually ended up kind of their roles adapting to kind of help others in the organization as well.
It all comes back to questions. Asking better
Yeah,
questions
yeah,
is the ultimate skill.
absolutely.
I have to ask you about the purple vegetable test. What did grocery search queries teach you about the gap between messy human intent and good corporate systems?
Yeah, so this was actually one of my favorite projects. And so we were working with a grocery chain essentially to build a new platform to help people just buy groceries online. And we quickly started to realize that kind of the way people actually really search for groceries is very different to how the original systems were architected. And kind of the top example I've found was, I mean, I, if you think purple vegetable, which vegetable do you think?
I'm going to say carrot, but I probably screwed up your story.
So most people would say aubergine or eggplant.
Okay.
Um, but aubergine and eggplant, a lot of people go like, what's the name of that vegetable again? And so we actually kind of, when we looked in the kind of, so there was a table in the data that said, okay, here are all the search queries where there were no immediate results for. And purple vegetable was quite high because people would just type purple vegetable, instead of aubergine or eggplant. But because the systems are built in a manner where it has to be an exact name match. If you go to like almost any grocery website or app today and type in purple vegetable, you will not get an aubergine. You'll not get a purple carrot. You'll not get an eggplant. You might get like purple toothpaste for kids, purple toothbrushes. I think I've seen some crazy things, but fundamentally, it happens because the way these systems were built were not were not built with human intent as part of how they were designed. And so there's been very little work done on how do people actually really search, what types of, messy kind of, human ways do they actually type stuff in. A lot of systems are just architected for, okay, you need to actually know the exact name of the product as opposed to, is it something fuzzy? Is it kind of something like purple vegetable where you need to actually go, let's build something that translates intent into products, which is what we ended up building. Yeah.
Is that simply answered now by plugging an LLM into everything? Like, is that the answer now for product development?
No, because LLM calls are expensive, and so one, and two, it's not a magic fix. I think if I think about a lot of the work that we had to do there, a lot of the work was building that translation layer to go from here's a product catalog to here's the intent of what someone is searching. Um, LLMs are much slower than regular search, so we had to really architect things in a way that works out. Okay, if something is a direct search, just go direct. If something, is fuzzy, utilize this. Utilize an LLM. We had to optimize for cost, so there's a lot of new problems that just plugging in an LLM introduces, that a lot of teams don't foresee. And I think that kind of, a lot of companies and teams are going, this is a magic bullet, but I mean, in my experience, that's never the case.
But you have talked about this concept of the new front door, which is where a few central AI agents might mediate all of our customer interactions. So
Mhm.
booking in a taxi might be done entirely
Yeah.
through an AI agent rather
Mhm.
than through a dedicated app or through a website that you visit. How do you think this is going to change what companies need to offer and how they evolve their design strategies, their business models, their entire reason for being?
I think in some domains, companies are going to have to completely reevaluate basically what service they fundamentally offer. And I mean, I think travel is probably one of those industries where the likes of Booking.com, Expedia, and even airlines are going to have to either kind of re-architect for a world where because people are looking for convenience in those domains, it's kind of how do we ensure that our data is surfaced in the right way? Maybe how do we ensure that our marketing and branding kind of elevates us where people kind of don't look for convenience where they think about us. So I think it's going to necessitate a lot of change in how companies think about who they fundamentally are
Are
in some
people
domains. Yeah.
Are people 100% efficiency seekers, or is there some emotion in there that businesses can also build on?
Yeah, I definitely don't think people are 100% efficiency seekers. And I've probably been accused of being an efficiency seeker, but I'm probably 75%. But I think people a lot of times enjoy the process of discovery, of, walking into a bookstore and just kind of looking around. There's a lot of emotion to both kind of discovering new products, but also just in browsing and searching. And I mean, like, you go to any coffee shop, you'll see people sitting on the laptop just kind of scrolling on, clothes websites for minutes at a time. And that's nothing to do with efficiency. So I do think there is a strong emotive element. And, if I think about the brands that people love and adore, it's not, again, it's not about efficiency. It's about kind of your identity and the attachment that you place on different products and services and brands. And I don't think that part is going to change at all.
So fast forward 5 years, I feel like there's these two almost polar opposites. There's the concentration of application development, product offerings, AI agents, efficiency. And then on the other side, you've got bookstores and the tangible physical experience
Hmm.
of breathing in the smell of paper and having an amazing conversation with someone behind the desk about their favorite book. How do these two things come together, and how does this relationship between humans and AI settle into something that
Yeah.
meshes?
I think we're already seeing it, and we've been seeing it for years. I think there's some domains like, when you walk into a grocery store, 10 years ago versus now, like, you'd stand in line, you'd the boop boop, and now kind of it's self checkouts, because that's a domain where a lot of people just want to be in and out. And so I think there will be, yeah, specific areas, industries, domains where people go like, yes, I'm going to use my AI agent, or it's going to be about kind of me not having to think about this decision. But there'll be a lot of other domains where it's about, I want to feel that thing. I want to be able to go and, sit on that bed in that kind of, horrible bed store that's a big warehouse before I buy it. And I think that's kind of part of being human. And I think the desire to touch and feel and feel connected to something, I think that's probably going to increase more as some parts just become more efficient, and kind of, we have to think less about them.
I love all the paths we've gone down in this conversation, and I love how your brain works, Tay. So I'm fascinated to ask, what is your all-star creative team? This is a segment where we get you to think about 4 people that you would have on your all-star creative team. They can be dead, alive, they can be a totally abstract concept, they can be the person next door. Who would you have on your team?
Number one would be Leonardo da Vinci. Been a big fan of his since I was a kid. I think he was an engineer, he was a writer, he painted the Mona Lisa. The number of things he was able to do is just like insane to me. And kind of just having someone like that on my team who could, we could be having a conversation as a team. He walks out, comes back the next day, and he's kind of, he could design this mechanical, beautiful thing. I think that, like, for me, that's a no-brainer.
Feels like he's got a very similar brain to yours.
I mean, that's the biggest compliment anyone's ever given me. Um, Second, James Cameron. I think probably a little bit similar to the Vinci, I think, but I just love his tenacity and just his ability to kind of see something, see a vision. I mean, like, if you like read about how, he filmed and created Avatar, for example, where literally invented new types of cameras to
Yeah.
make that vision come true. I think he actually holds a world record for being the first person to go solo to the deepest part of the ocean. And that was kind of part of his journey making Titanic. It's just someone who's like really has a vision and just makes it happen no matter what, and literally invents new things to make it happen. I think that's like hero of mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Third person, Ada Lovelace. I think, maybe there's a bit of, love there because she was the first computer programmer, but I mean, she was also a poet. And I think that's pretty amazing to have someone that thought about technology in a way where it was about bringing different disciplines together. And so I think kind of I've read a lot about how she had this philosophy of wanting to bring together people from completely different walks of life and kind of meshing them together and just seeing the mess and the tension that came to be. And I think, we've talked about that a little bit here. And I just think that having someone with that brain as part of the team would just be amazing. Fourth person, Virgil Abloh. I think, like the ability to take an idea and really understand how will this resonate in the culture today, and how do we communicate and translate this to the outside world. I think, again, having a brain like that that isn't necessarily, hey, let's create this amazing thing, but really, hey, how do we kind of help it connect to real people? I think that's an invaluable skill. So those four would be my dream team.
I love the diverse weaving of skills that you put together there. It spans 4 centuries. You got poets, programmers, you got people who intimately understand today's culture. I think that would be an amazing creative team.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have had enough time for Brody to take your initial sketch of little Tey and turn it into something amazing with AI. So let's bring him back to see the final results of this AI-human love triangle.
Let's do it.
I can see the original sketch. Yes.
Oh, that's original? Okay, good.
This is the original. This isn't the final product, but this is where we started from the prompt, where we had you sketch out yourself many moons ago.
Oh, wow.
And looking at this is where we could have started, where now we're bringing AI into this, and we're visualizing what that might have looked like back in the day, but you threw a curveball with neoclassicism. So what would this look like if we reskin that? And it could only be presented in the gallery of Tey. So this hypothetical.
This just looks like real life, Tey running around in a fur cape and a 3-piece suit.
And I have literally those exact glasses.
Yeah, I may have used a reference image, but in this hypothetical, you've created a gallery where you're going to show off your masterpiece, which is this beautiful neoclassicism painting of you as this boy. But to promote it, first we had some posters for your big show for the gallery of Tey, and then last but not least, your masterpiece, which for the love of efficiency, which was you typing on your computer and coding back in the day, but now in neoclassical style. And then last but not least, when the folks come to view your gallery.
Oh, that's awesome.
Maybe you have some motion in there or not, but this is the final product where the gallery of Tey shows off your big masterpiece.
Well done, Brody. That's incredible. Concept, Brody. Yeah. I mean, you're making me feel very old, but that's incredible.
Oh, no.
I love it. It was an entire concept. It wasn't just an artwork. It was the marketing campaign. It was
that's really
my gallery and the artwork itself. You did it all.
Thank you.
No, that's incredible, Brody. Like, awesome stuff.
Appreciate it.
All right. It has been a fascinating conversation, Tey, and I could probably spend about 4 hours talking to you, but we only have 60 seconds left for some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Hit me. I'm ready.
All right. What is the one thing you're reading right now?
Ethan Mollick's book. What's it called?
Ethan Mollick, something about AI. That'll do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You literally recommend lying to AI tools to test them. What is the best lie you have told one?
I was doing research about myself, and I said, I'm definitely not Tey. And I kind of made up this elaborate story about kind of me being an investor. And I had a lot of fun just making up that lie to try and get it not to be sycophantic. Yeah.
The 4 modes: clarity, compression, reflection, execution. Which one do you personally skip most often?
Reflection. I think it's tough to kind of have yourself challenged. I think that's human. So it's what I'm most actively trying to get myself to do more.
You walked away from engineering in the 2000s and confused almost everyone. What was the best confused reaction you got?
To this day, my mom is still confused, and she still asks me when I'm going to get a real job. So, yeah.
Your investing platform hit 2.5 times year one targets. What was the one design decision that unlocked that?
From user research and testing, we worked out don't ever use the word investing if you want to get people who don't understand investing to actually invest. And so all the language that we constructed came from the principle of how do we explain this without ever using the word investing.
Complexity is easy, clarity is hard. What's the hardest thing you've ever had to simplify?
To simplify data privacy for a cosmetics company, for the customers of a cosmetics company. And data privacy is not an easy thing to explain. Yeah.
Definitely sounds tricky. Finish this sentence. The thing AI will never replace is
the ability to feel the weight of a decision.
Nice one. And that is it. That's all we have time for. Thank you so much for going down every rabbit hole we could find and telling us all about how you approach AI, Tey. It was amazing.
This has been incredible. No, thank you so much. Brilliant questions. Just, such a fun conversation. Thank you.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us on this episode of Prompted, a podcast about AI, people, and the creative spark. To keep up with future episodes, please subscribe wherever you love to listen to podcasts, or head on over to YouTube to see all the magic. And if you're enjoying the show, please leave us a rating or a review. We read every single one, and we always love hearing your thoughts. Until next time, keep chasing that creative spark. Just a reminder, if you're keen to join us at our AI Vision event in London, scan the QR code on screen or search for AI Vision London. I would love to see you there.